Strong wind signal number 3 raised as tropical storm Nuri nears Hong Kong. Another person confirmed infected with COVID-19 from the Shatin housing estate cluster. And Brazil overtakes Britain to have the world's second highest death toll from COVID, with no signs of the outbreak easing.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The observatory issued the strong wind signal number 3 this afternoon as tropical storm Nuri nears Hong Kong. Macau issued its typhoon signal number 3 at 6 p.m.
But experts say Nuri is not a well-organized storm and its winds area is relatively small. So unless Nuri intensifies or starts tracking closer to the city, the chance of a stronger signal isn't high. Caleb Leung reports.
Tropical storm Nuri is approaching the territory, and even members of the public can feel it. This man says he can feel the wind, and the wind is hot. As for this woman, she says the weather is so stuffy she can hardly breathe. On its current track, the observatory says Nuri is not expected to score a direct hit on the territory.
It is forecast to move northwest at about 22 kilometers per hour, crossing the northern part of the South China Sea and moving towards the western parts of Guangdong. According to the current forecast track, Nuri will be closest to Hong Kong tomorrow morning, skirting within around 200 kilometers to our southwest.
The observatory is expecting occasional squally showers tomorrow, and it will be windy with rough seas at first. There still will be showers this coming Monday and Tuesday, but the weather will improve in the middle and latter parts of next week. At around 11 a.m., when the standby signal number 1 was in effect, a 20-meter-long yacht capsized off the coast of Shaanxi Wan in Saikong. 13 people aboard the vessel were rescued by boatsmen nearby. They were later taken to the Marine Police base by police and Forest Service vessels. One of the men sustained light injuries to his leg. Over in Macau, the enclave is expecting occasional thundery showers tonight. Nuri is expected to reach its closest point to the city on Sunday, and the weather tomorrow is forecast to be cloudy with heavy showers at times. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Well, another coronavirus infection has emerged at the Shatin housing estate where a cluster was earlier reported. Today's case brings the local tally up to 1,109.
An expert suspects airborne transmission of the virus may have taken place, but is still unsure what could have facilitated it. Kena Chu has the story.
The new patient is a 33-year-old male residing in flat 810 of Luk Chun House. He is a neighbor of another 34-year-old patient who was the building's first coronavirus case. On June 4th, he developed a fever during his stay at a quarantine center. He was subsequently sent to Prince of Wales Hospital, where medical staff found no sign of pneumonia in his lungs. They also conducted multiple coronavirus tests on him, but found no traces of the disease. Still, his fever persisted while he also began developing pneumonia. On Friday, samples were extracted via his bronchus, which later tested positive for COVID-19. The patient is now in stable condition. His two brothers sharing the same flat have been admitted to hospital for fever, but have so far tested negative for the coronavirus. The emergence of a 9th patient from Luk Chun House prompted an inspection by authorities and experts of the building in Shatin this afternoon. The team included top microbiologist Yoon Kwok-young, who suspects the patient may have become sick by inhaling infected particles in the air. However, investigations are still ongoing concerning how an airborne transmission might have taken place. A respiratory expert from the Chinese University of Hong Kong thinks there is no need for people to worry about a widespread community transmission or second wave of infection yet.
At the moment, all the confirmed cases are actually confined to Luk Chun House, and it hasn't spread beyond this building to other surrounding buildings.
Kena Chu, TVB News.
Well, authorities in Beijing have locked down 11 residential communities near a wholesale food market to try to stem a new outbreak of COVID-19. Officials said today that at least 45 workers at the Xinfadi market tested positive for the coronavirus, though they showed no symptoms. Authorities in Beijing's Fengtai district, where the market is located, said the district is in a wartime emergency mode to contain the virus. Earlier this week, 7 people were confirmed positive with COVID-19 after visiting or working at the market. The Xinfadi market, which has 4,000 tenants, will be disinfected. The new cluster is the first locally transmitted case of COVID in the capital in more than 50 days.
Overseas, Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has marked another grim milestone. The country has just overtaken Britain to become the second highest number in the world after the United States.
But despite the mounting toll, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro continues to push to reopen the country, even as surveys show most people believe the worst is yet to come. So far, the coronavirus has killed almost 42,000 people in Brazil, with close to 830,000 confirmed cases. In Sao Paulo, the largest cemetery in Latin America has exhumed more than twice the remains it normally does to free burial plots. Workers say they're now digging up more than 100 bodies a day. Gravedigger Adenlitson Costa says he's already lost 2 family members and 2 friends to COVID-19. He worries things will get worse as quarantines relax and stores begin to reopen. Like so many others, Marcio da Nascimento has felt the wrath of COVID-19 firsthand. In April, he lost his 25-year-old son, Hugo, to the virus. But after weeks of family therapy, all the pain came rushing back during a recent incident. On the famous Copacabana beach near his home, Marcio caught a group of people toppling crosses placed in the sand to honor the country's coronavirus victims. Marcio says the people felt COVID-19 was being overblown, a sentiment shared by Brazil's president. He rushed out to put the crosses back upright and shouted at the group that his son was one of the victims. In Brazil, Valentine's Day is held every June 12th. But in the era of social distancing, a romantic date at a drive-in cinema looks a little different. The Love Cinema Drive-In recently opened in the same area that hosted the Olympic Games 4 years ago. While enjoying a romantic movie, couples could order food and drinks delivered straight to their vehicles. Meanwhile, Brazilians are buckling up for several more weeks of social restrictions. Experts predict the peak of Brazil's pandemic won't arrive until August.
Staying overseas, the U.S. states may be rolling back lockdowns, but the coronavirus isn't done with the states. Data shows cases are rising in nearly half the states, and the trend could intensify as people return to work and school and venture outside. 10 days after reopening began in Arizona, hospitals there have been told to prepare for the worst. Texas has more hospitalized COVID-19 patients than at any time before. And the governor of North Carolina is rethinking plans to reopen schools or businesses after recent jumps in cases. The state just recorded its highest single-day increase. Doctors say more testing means more cases are being discovered, which means there's more cases to be found. Experts say the micro-epidemics across the country could get worse in the wake of nationwide protests.
Lebanese security forces fired tear gas and clashed with anti-government protesters in Beirut over a widening financial crisis. Protesters threw stones and fireworks at police, and security forces responded with tear gas in an effort to disperse the crowd. Lebanon's prime minister held an emergency cabinet meeting amid renewed nationwide protests spurred by a plunging national currency and economic crisis. The government and its central bank promised to inject fresh dollars into the market after the local currency lost nearly 70% of its value in weeks. Lebanon's president blames the currency plunge on manipulation by political enemies. But the Lebanese blamed the crisis on decades of corruption and waste.
North Korean state television reported the country's latest broadside against South Korea, saying relations were now at an uncontrollable stage. Although the government in the South stopped the activists, the statement from Pyongyang said this had come too late. Coming up, thousands flock to Ocean Park as it reopens for the first time in months because of the pandemic. Finance chief plays down the risk of U.S. sanctions on the city. And New York governor signs law to stop police from using chokeholds to subdue people under arrest.
Welcome back to TVB News. More signs of normality returning to Hong Kong as the city's iconic Ocean Park reopened today following a lengthy closure due to the pandemic.
Social distancing measures are in place to keep visitors and workers safe, and the park will only allow 9,000 visitors a day for the first 2 weeks. Haley Zhou has more.
Ocean Park has been shut down since January due to the pandemic, but its reopening was possible only after the government bailed it out from the verge of bankruptcy with $5.4 billion. This morning at 10 o'clock, it opened its gate to those who've been waiting for excitement and thrills, something that they haven't had for a long time.
We have stayed home for almost 6 months, so we are so bored. On the first day, we are so excited and happy to come to Ocean Park, back to Ocean Park to play again.
The reopen of the Ocean Park is like a little victory for Hong Kong people by showing that we take a quite success control measures, and that's why we can come here today.
This is a great pleasure, and it actually is a lot of excitement, for the park to reopen today after 139 days closure. For the first 2 weeks when we reopen the park, we operate with the reduced capacity by about 25% of our maximum capacity that we can accommodate. It's about 9,000.
With sporadic new COVID-19 cases in the city, various measures are implemented to keep everyone safe, from temperature checks to social distancing to wearing a face mask. Each group of 8 people or fewer should keep a distance from others when in lines, in theaters, and on rides. An online reservation is a must for all visitors except for kids below 3 years and senior citizens aged 65 and above, who can bring up to 2 children aged between 3 and 11. The park says on its website, bookings are full for the next 2 weeks until Friday the 26th. Meanwhile, the other major theme park in the city, Hong Kong Disneyland, is also expected to reopen soon, but it hasn't announced the exact date yet. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
Police arrested 43 people during last night's protests around town. They include 28 males and 15 females who were arrested on suspicion of offenses such as wounding, illegal assembly, and possession of an offensive weapon. Responding to online calls, they took part in gatherings last night to mark 1 year since clashes erupted between police and anti-extradition protesters in Admiralty. This afternoon, 3 arrested members of the Hong Kong Secondary School Student Strike Platform were released on bail. Isaac Chiang, a spokesperson of the activist group, said police interfered with their street booth on East Point Road, despite previous promises not to. He also criticized officers for abusing their powers by inflicting excessive violence on arrestees.
The Civil Service Secretary says civil servants have a constitutional duty to support the national security laws Beijing is to impose on Hong Kong.
Patrick Nip says expressing opposing views about it in personal capacity, including on their private social media pages, shouldn't be a problem as long as those comments remain private.
The basic law and our Hong Kong laws guarantee the freedom of expression and also the freedom of assemblies and all that. So if you do it in your personal capacity to express your views, so long as it complies with the law, that's of course it's okay. As regards to social media, the hard fact is, even though you are meant to talk about things within a private circle, the reality is that sometimes this will be leaked out and then become public. So you have to be mindful about that.
Well, the financial secretary says the government has no plans to review Hong Kong's peg to the U.S. dollar, despite the threat of sanctions over Beijing's plan to impose national security laws.
Paul Chan also reassured the public that there is no need to worry about the United States planning to limit the SAR's access to the U.S. dollar.
We have taken reference to the sanctions previously invoked by the U.S. towards different jurisdictions. Some of those sanctions are trying to cause inconvenience to the targeted individuals or jurisdictions. We have our response plan, but please pardon me for not being able to disclose the details here.
Back in the U.S., the governor of New York has signed a package of police accountability measures into law, including a ban on police chokeholds. This comes amid nationwide protests over the death of George Floyd during his arrest by police.
A judge has also ordered police in Seattle to temporarily stop using tear gas and pepper spray on demonstrators. Leslie Tang has more.
Protesters marched quietly through the rain-soaked streets of Seattle. It was a contrast to the sometimes raucous demonstrations of the Black Lives Matter movement. A judge has ordered Seattle police to temporarily stop using tear gas, pepper spray, and flashbang devices to break up peaceful protests. The 2-week ban is a victory for groups who say authorities were heavy-handed during recent demonstrations. Protests have swept through the country following the death of George Floyd, who died after a police officer knelt on his neck. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took things to another level, signing into law a sweeping package of police accountability measures. They include a ban on police chokeholds, setting up a special prosecutor's office to investigate the deaths of people during and after encounters with police, and allowing the release of officers' disciplinary records. The measures were approved earlier this week by the state's Democratic-led legislature. Some of the bills were proposed years ago, but failed to get the green light.
Meanwhile, thousands turned out for a Black Lives Matter rally in the Australian city of Perth today. This, despite being urged by the government to stay away to avoid spreading the coronavirus. The crowd was estimated to be between 8,000 and 15,000 people. The rally was a call to highlight what the protesters see as systemic racism against Indigenous people in Australia. Heavy rainstorms in southern China have killed at least 5 more people and left many others missing. Guizhou province in the southwest of China has been hit hard by rain-triggered flooding. The downpours have swamped homes and farmlands. More than 2,000 homes, 35 road sections, and 3 bridges have been destroyed so far. Earlier storms left at least 13 dead in nearby Hunan province and the Guangxi region. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.